Hello and welcome back to one of our documentaries. You've probably seen the title in the thumbnail. This is not about a car, it's about an engine. More particularly the V8 engine, which is like my all-time favorite. However, we will be using this Jaguar F-Pace SVR as the basis for this documentary. Chiefly because it can do this. Woo. Is that the fuel light? Okay, so usually we split these documentaries into 4 videos, but we've decided that for this one, we'll just make one big video. And we're going to start with a general introduction to the V8 engine. So if you know all of that, hopefully you can skip the chapters or the timeline. Then we'll do a bit of a history lesson, interesting cars that it came in, applications, that sort of thing. Definitely pros and cons. And in the end, yeah, sort of a eulogy. Not quite, maybe a love song or a poem, an ode to the V8 engine and how it belongs in today's world. Maybe some funny footage in the end as well. Enjoy!
What is a V8? To keep the explanation fairly basic, there are many different types of V8s. V is the shape of the engine, 8 is the amount of cylinders. And because a V has 2 sides, there are 4 cylinders on each bank. They all work towards a single shared crankshaft, that's the bit that provides usable power. And most V8s have a V angle of 90 degrees. That's the angle between its 2 banks. So that takes care of the shape, but what about the size? Well, to mention its 2 extremities, nowadays you can buy a tabletop V8, while the largest version for a car is around 572 cubic inches, or 9.4 liters. That's a Chevy big block engine. The more regular stuff, as an average over the years, has been anywhere from 3.5 to about 6 liters in capacity. Almost every V8 was mounted longitudinally, or in a north-south position, if you open the bonnet or hood. Quite a few sports cars, mostly Italians, have mid-mounted V8s, while a handful were transversely mounted, meaning from left to right. Bizarrely, this includes a few front-engined Volvos. They were among the manufacturers who made smaller angled V8s to save space, but it turns out that the 90-degree version is better balanced. It produces fewer vibrations or resonances, although part of a V8's appeal will always be its slightly rough and rumbling sound. Speaking of which, all those burbling and roaring V8s have something called a cross-plane crankshaft. That's the shared component at the bottom of the V, because this construction is also fairly balanced when compared to the alternative, which is called a flat plane crank. Essentially this means that its layout is horizontally flat, as opposed to the messy layout of a cross-plane device. The flat plane crank is favored for use in high-performance V8s because, again, to keep this simple, it can breathe and rev better. To quickly show you what we mean, Ferrari builds flat plane V8s, and because they also have a different firing order, these tend to sound more like a superbike or a hornet's nest that you just whacked with a stick. By comparison, the cross-plane crankshaft in a regular V8 makes it sound grumpy and rumbly and thundery, like a muscle car. Let us know in the comments, which one do you prefer? Pros. The first advantage of a V8 was that, up till recently, it made great power when compared to its size or weight ratio. Most of them make good torque as well. Obviously, there's the sound of a V8. Nothing sounds like a V8. Except maybe a straight 8, but they disappeared a long time ago. And then of course there are bragging rights. V8 is a magic word to most petrolheads. Cons. The negatives of a V8 are obviously that by modern standards it's too large and bulky. That's not good for packaging. The same goes for consumption. V8s are very, very thirsty when compared to modern engines. Ditto for weight. Obviously a 6-pot or a turbo 4 is lighter. Compared to smaller engines, maintenance or repairs can also be more costly and complicated.
Okay, now it's time for a bit of a history lesson. Here's the cyclist I passed earlier. Afternoon, sir. And some of the interesting applications that a V8 has. Let's go.
History of the V8. V8s have been produced in everything from lazy flatheads, torquey turbo diesel truck motors, insanely powerful top fuel dragster engines, silky smooth luxury car propulsion, high-strung sports car engines, out-the-box, no, literally out-of-a-box tuning upgrades, old planes, fancy boats, not to forget Top Gear's food blender, and much, much more. The first ever V8 engine was apparently made in 1904 for French boats and aeroplanes. The first cars with such a motor arrived after 1910 and include Peerless, something called a Didion Bouton, as well as Cadillac. The V8 really got popular in the 1930s when the aforementioned flathead made its appearance, and car designers saw the benefit of using an engine which is shorter, slightly wider, but also lower than the traditional inline motors of the time. Although most car manufacturers built a V8 at some point during the last 100 years, we think its most famous time was that of the American muscle car era. Sure, you can probably add a decade or two either side, but the 1960s is where the V8 was at its most glorious.
Right, I think at this point it's rather essential that I introduce you to Hamun, which you can probably see is a Land Rover Defender. Please, no jokes, I know them all off by heart. More importantly, this is my Folks's 1994 Defender 110 Highline V8, but it's one of a handful of 3.9 carbureted hot cam factory built cars which they bought in southern Africa. And whereas this is not a fast car by any standard, it's a reasonably nippy Land Rover. And especially back in the day, almost 30 years ago, this thing used to worry little hot hatches. I distinctly remember that. And the throttle response is hilarious. The speed, not so much. We're still not doing 60 k's an hour. Now we are. There's 80. But the noise and the response, obviously the cam does quite a difference. I can't get enough of this car. It's not a great car. It's not a fast car, but it's just so much fun. And Hamun, it's almost completely his fault that I love V8s and I love the noise. 70. We're barely speeding. Oh, I can drive this car all day, every day. It's one of a handful of cars. They didn't make many before the BMW ones came. So if you want to see a documentary on Hamun, I'd be more than willing to make one. Morning, Star Office. Not breaking the law. Still not breaking the law. Now we are. Apologies. The other thing that's Hamun's fault is I love noisy cars, especially noisy V8s. And I love cars that sound fast, but they're not. You get to have more fun for more of the time. It's a win-win. I love this car. I absolutely love this car. Sorry, back to the documentary.
Okay, here are a few famous V8s. The Ford Flathead it didn't have any cylinder heads because the valves were in the block. The Chevy small block, which has been built in excess of 100 million times. The Rover V8, a compact and lightweight, all-aluminium ex-Buick design. Mercedes M100, used in the 600 Grosser, 300 SL 6.3 and 450 SEL 6.9. The Moto Guzzi, a 500cc or 30.5 cubic inch V8 motorbike racer capable of 12,000 RPM and 280 kilometers an hour. Ford small block or Windsor, which ran from 1961 to 2002. The Ferrari F1 to pretty much every Ferrari V8. The Toyota or Lexus UZ, a relatively simple yet robust family of quad-cam V8s which are easily modified and hence the darling of aftermarket tuners. Other notable V8s include the Chrysler Hemi, most older Rolls-Royces, Coventry Climax and Cosworth DFV, Chevy's Big Block, every new McLaren, and of course the Jaguar Land Rover AJ V8, now in its third generation and powering this metallic amber F-Pace SVR. The future of the V8. So, here's the big question, and probably the main reason we made this video. Does the V8 engine have a future? Is there still room in our automotive world for such a comparably large and wasteful dinosaur? Well, the short and very painful answer is no. The V8's time has come and gone, with a steep decline probably around the turn of this millennium. Gone are the days where your mom's station wagon or dad's 4x4 had a lazy V8. New cars and new legislation demand the strictest emissions and craziest consumption goals, which is why most of Europe is scrambling for electric cars. And even if they weren't, by modern standards any V8 is thirsty and dirty, so they've been confined to specialist vehicles. Sports and supercars, crazy SUVs like this one, turbo diesel commercial stuff, and of course, the world of tuning and motorsport. But that doesn't mean we should all hate them. Quite the opposite actually. Petrolhead or not, we can now love and appreciate a Banshee Ferrari or howling Mustang because they're fast becoming an oddity, a relic. Something so rare and exotic that its puny production numbers make absolutely no difference to Greta or the Green Party, other than irritating them with a price tag. And to finally give the V8 engine the send-off it deserves, I like to think of it as guilty excess, like midnight drinks and a bonfire on the beach. Binge-watching an entire rainy weekend away. Buying the most expensive item on your wish list, not to impress others, but to reward yourself. It's all rather ridiculous, potentially selfish, and generally frowned upon these days. But it's oh so good for your soul. Thanks for watching.
there's the camera. I've just driven past it. So let's try that again.